Hello, for Karina Sanchez, I'm Kiki Rawapuno asking your questions now. The United Nations estimates that at any one time there are 2.5 million traffic victims in the world, with the majority of them in Asia and the Pacific. Studies show over 1 million women and children are trafficked internationally every year, becoming victims of sexual exploitation, labor exploitation, and abuse. CAT, WAP, and ILO estimates show 500,000 of them could be in prostitution, and experts say the deepening financial crisis could lead to a spike in human trafficking. Jean Enriquez is Executive Director of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women. Jean, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Nako, that last thing that I said, this is if this is indeed something to worry about, then you really have your work cut out for yourself, because it is an economic crisis time. Does that affect really the situation of trafficking?
Certainly. In the last 2 years, we know that the crisis had been here for a long time. Right? It's not just when the financial institutions came out as being bankrupt. It has been here, especially in the Philippines, with the agricultural crisis, with the food crisis and all, especially the rural women have been feeling it. And most vulnerable of the women's sector are the rural women. So in the last 2 years, we have observed really an remarkable increase in the number of migrant women, and of course corollary to that is the number of trafficked women and girls, not only towards other countries but also towards the cities from the rural areas. In the streets of Cubao itself, where we help organize women in prostitution, there's Bagong Kamalayan, a group of survivors that organizing women. In the last 2 months, I observed that it increased by 30%, the number of women.
Wow,
in
that's
the
a
streets
big
of
number.
Cubao. Yeah, and to think that the local government has been, trying to direct their efforts towards buyers and also pimps, trying to arrest them. And there's also a local ordinance against prostitution, but still the number keeps going up.
And you seem to be surprised about that. I guess you think that there is an effort. And are you saying it is, it should address a different problem, or should it try a different solution besides going after the pimps, going after the users? Since you're saying parang hindi yata masyadong gumanda yung sitwasyon.
It always has to be multi-pronged. I think, or we think, that it's important to have this law and also local ordinances that address the roots of the problem. That includes, of course, the unequal situation of men and women, not only economically but also culturally, where men believe that they have the power and privilege to buy women and children. That should be addressed by education but also by legal, not only normative measures. So they should continue to be arrested. But since we started with the issue of poverty, that also is a huge,
it's a major
structural problem.
And that's probably one of the reasons also why Asia and the Pacific, this region is known, is notorious for this kind of a problem. It's also because of the economic situation here. But can we be clear as to where the Philippines places among the countries in Southeast Asia? Because we know Thailand, for one, is a really big, prostitution country. What about how do we rank?
It's very difficult to establish the numbers, especially in terms of victims, but we can see a pattern that countries like the Philippines, Thailand, as you've mentioned, Indonesia, and especially countries in South Asia, I would say South Asian countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, India would rank highest. But the Philippines is not so far away. It would come very close to these countries within the region. And destination countries would be the ones considered to be relatively well off, like Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, Taiwan as well.
So it's a regional thing, like the trafficking of women from the Philippines and other poorer Asia-Pacific countries. They're usually brought to the richer, the first world countries within the region, within Asia. So, nandiyan ang Singapore, Japan, etc. Because of the movies now and all the other, in media, there are all the other portrayals of this kind of problem, trafficking. We know that it exists in Europe also. We know that European women are also under this kind of, this kind of stress and tension. But, ganun ba yun, regional?
But the trafficking of Asian women is not also limited to Asia. We're trafficked everywhere almost. Europe, the US, and even Africa.
So, linalabas talaga to all the different countries. I mentioned that. I mentioned movies now really portraying these things. that movie Taken, it's very current. It talks about trafficking of women. And of course, you know, Slumdog Millionaire also touches a little bit on that. Plus, your efforts and ours in media and, you know, advocates like you, you would think because there is a wider, you know, knowledge and there is more of information out there that perhaps this problem would, you know, would decrease and would improve, but it seems not.
As we've been saying, other than the economic crisis itself, that there are other structural problems attendant to trafficking. The ongoing war in many places in Asia, including Mindanao in the Philippines, and also other countries of the world, again contribute to the vulnerability of the women getting trafficked.
So let's get specific nga, Jean. Like if you get caught here picking up a girl from the streets, the most the easiest to imagine, yung mga naglalakad dyan, mga hookers trying to pick up a gig for a night. Kung mahulihan ka, kung mahuli kang ganun, ano bang parusa sa'yo?
Well, unfortunately, the law still provides for 2 commission of the act before the buyer gets imprisoned. On the first act, he gets fined first, and then he does community service. On the second commission of the act, that's when he gets imprisoned for a year and then gets to pay a fine of 50,000.
And so how do you know if they've done it once before, if this is a second one? So parang wala, diba? In other words, if I am yun nga, a male interested in accruing the services of I really don't have to worry about getting picked up, do I? Or there, you know, any sanctions. What about for the women? Shouldn't they also worry about what would happen to them when they're brought in? We see that all the time in the newscast. The women are, you know, there are raids, and the women are arrested and brought in. What happens to them?
That's really a problem because anti-trafficking law supposedly provides for them to be protected as victims. But then there still exists a law that's a throwback from the Spanish colonial times, which is called the Vagrancy Act, which still criminalizes the victims of trafficking. Well, to be very technical about it, victims of prostitution.
Right.
And we think that they should not be criminalized. They should be supported because they're coming from situations of poverty, as we were discussing. A lot of them, from our research, 75% up to 90% of them are actually victims of incestuous rape when they were young, which makes them more vulnerable to pimps coming to them and saying, you're being used anyway, why not earn from it?
So, let me interrupt you, Jim, because this is something that you talk about all the time, but maybe you don't realize that there are many people out there who might, at first blush, not agree with you when you call the prostitutes victims because they're thinking, yung mga asawa ko, sila ang nagloloko yan dahil nandiyan ang mga prostitutes. Bakit sila ang victims? Hindi ba kaming mga asawa or kaming mga babaeng, di ba, na may mga asawang nagloloko or, you know, things like that. I mean, that's not an uncommon sentiment.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because first, from what you mentioned, the buyers are mostly married men. Now, why are they buying? Why are they not questioning why the men are buying in the first place? Like rape, sexual harassment, and other forms of violence against women, such as domestic violence, the women are the ones who are always questioned, as if they want it, as if women wanted to be raped, because these are the lies of pornography, as if women want to be battered, as if women wanted to be prostituted. Who wants to be used every night by 5 men who you don't even know, you know? And but then the demand is never questioned. That's why the analysis of looking at trafficking as a question of supply and demand, where women are only being used as commodities to satisfy the demand that's created by a culture that's very unequal, that has always assumed that it is the power of men to buy women after work, you know, as a part of their entertainment and all. It was never questioned, but it's always the women who are blamed, but it's never seen where they're coming from. One just has to ask oneself, would you want
you
to...
have to go a step beyond, besides what you're seeing and the problem that is in front of you. You have to really think about why it all started.